It is said that when an old man dies, a library burns down. A lifetime of stories and experiences are lost just like that. Things too mundane for anyone to have recorded for posterity become great historical mysteries. There are a lot of reasons I'd like to be cryonically frozen and wake up in the future, but one of the big ones is so that I can be surprised by what future generations remember about my time. Something extremely minor about our lives is going to be considered a major theme of our era. Someone only a few people have heard of now is going to be remembered as one of our time's biggest celebrities. Conversely, some things everyone knows now will be completely forgotten. In the Victorian era, salt and pepper shakers were sold in sets of 3. Nobody today knows what the third shaker was supposed to contain. The leading theory suggests that it was mustard seed, but we can't be sure. Sometimes that library is literal, and it burns down by being scattered to the 4 winds. Go to a flea market, look at old photos, old journals, old tchotchkes. Those were someone's family heirlooms once. Now the people who have them don't know who they belong to, and the descendants of the original owners don't know where they are now, nor do they care. The vast majority of lost media is probably out there somewhere. Its owners just don't know that it's lost. Which brings us to a Reddit post made earlier this year on r/silentfilm by an account that seems to have been created just to make this post. The OP had recently inherited a collection of stuff from his grandfather, which included 65 canisters of silent film reels that had belonged to OP's great-grandfather, who had worked at an Orpheum theater somewhere in the Midwest in the 1930s. Most of the canisters were unlabeled, and some seemed empty or too damaged to contain a watchable movie, but 24 of them had barely legible writing on them. OP transcribed as best as they could, and silent film buffs were able to identify a fair number of the movies. Iron Horse, listed as Can 4 Broken, is a 1924 John Ford epic. Stella Dallas may be either a 1925 silent film or a 1937 remake with sound. The Wages of Sin is likewise either a 1938 exploitation film or a 1929 drama with an all-black cast. There's a movie called Fast and Furious, most likely a 1927 comedy about, yes, car racing, with no connection to the current franchise about car racing. In fact, there are a lot of movies with that name, only some of them about racing. Others were only listed by genre. Western, number 3, 6R. Educational farm/soil, 1R. News/shorts, mixed, 3 cans. OP's grandpa or great-grandpa probably added these descriptions many years after the fact because some of them suggest even the original owner of the reels wasn't sure what movie they contained, and some of the scrawled words seem to be commenting on the quality of the film reels. There's comedy 5R bad/shrunk, and serial chap unknown. Most of the canisters appear to only contain one or a few reels of a longer film. The exact date of the collection is unclear because a lot of the identifiable movies have 2 versions, a silent version made in the 1920s and a remake with sound about a decade later. It was the 1930s that really was the golden age of remakes because they were remaking all the silent films that were already classics to include sound and in some cases color. One enigmatic listing is Ring Eng Boxing, A.H. A commenter speculates that this could be another movie that coincidentally carries the title of a better-known modern flick, Alfred Hitchcock's The Ring, 1927, made when the master of suspense was just 28. The ring in question is a boxing ring. Why are boxing rings square? Why is the square that people box in called a ring? Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Hitchcock's The Ring is well preserved in film registries, but it sure would be cool to have a genuine 1920s reel of it. But there's another movie marked AH in this collection. Fear, O God, AH. And this was the one that really caught people's eyes. Of the 54 movies Alfred Hitchcock directed in his half-century career, from The Pleasure Garden in 1926 to Family Plot in 1976, only one is lost. It's his second feature, also from 1926, released in Europe as The Mountain Eagle, and in the US as Fear, O God. The Mountain Eagle/Fear, O God may be one of the world's most wanted pieces of lost media, and this Redditor just sold his stash of film reels to a pawn shop. I'm your host, Tor Parsons. These are my co-hosts, Jollibee the Durian, Siegfried the Slug, and a new one, Chuggy the Axolotl. But first, I have a warning. It will be 2 weeks until the next Tours Cabinet video unless you subscribe to the Tours Cabinet Patreon and get the next video a week early. From now on, channel members and Patreon members will receive all Tours Cabinet content a whole week before the pros get it, because they deserve it, and you, freeloader, do not. Also, I regret that I didn't do anything for April Fools this year. Last year I did the Chinese democracy video, and I have another big honkin' alt-hist coming up, but I don't have anything specifically prepared as an April Fool, so I guess I should include some lies in this video. On the Tours Cabinet Discord, which you can also access exclusively by donating to the Tours Cabinet Patreon, there is a channel called Lies. It is devoted to lying, and every now and then I like to share my favorite lies. From McLovin, I can smell my own brain. Fruit chips. Atlanta spelled backward is still Atlanta. This one's subtle. I love it. And from Casey, a long-form lie. In 1958, a large cache of Spanish gold was discovered on a property of an abandoned homestead southwest of Tucson, Arizona. The local government, digging nearby to see if any additional caches could be found, accidentally stumbled on a portal to El Dorado, the mythical city of gold. Fearing discovery, the Air Force quickly stepped into Philly's hole dug for gold hunting with a concrete-lined ballistic missile silo, creating ICBM Site 571-7. However, as the land was owned by the county, and the contractors digging the holes were contracted out by the state while doing surveying work, an extraordinarily long zoning fight has been taking place in the U.S. legal system for the last 68 years to determine which agency gets to claim ownership over the portal. Multiple shadow campaigns for Pima County Commissioner and local judgeships have seen upwards of $1 billion combined dollars put into influencing the outcome of what to most people seem like marginal, uninteresting races. Thank you, Casey. For the record, Casey has a channel of their own called Railfan Junction, and we have started a monthly podcast, Infodump, about trains and other autistic subjects, of which the first episode will release on Tuesday, April 7th on the new Tours Cabinet second channel. Stay tuned for more info about that. I'm still your host, Tor Parsons, and welcome to Tours Cabinet of Curiosities. What can be said that hasn't already been said about Alfred Hitchcock? I truly think he is to cinema what the Beatles are to music. A friend of mine quipped recently that while this may be difficult to believe, if you've been raised knowing only the Beatles' historic reputation, if you really get an appreciation of how music is made, you'll find that the Beatles are actually underrated. I think the same is true of Hitchcock. Psycho was the first slasher movie. North by Northwest was basically the first James Bond movie. Like the Beatles, Hitchcock was prone to doing experiments that ended up also having mass appeal rather than feeling pretentious and avant-garde. In his movie Lifeboat, the only set he used was a lifeboat. And in Rope, which you really must see, it's shot to make it look like it was a single take without any cuts, something that wasn't technologically possible in those days. Born and raised in the London suburbs, living above his parents' fish and chip shop, Hitchcock first got a foot in the door in the world of cinema as a title card artist for silent films, a job he got through working in advertising. Bit by bit, he climbed the ladder, becoming allowed to do more and more jobs on film sets until finally he was asked to direct a movie, a melodrama called The Pleasure Garden, filmed in Munich. It was the 1920s, and Weimar Germany was the place to be if you wanted to make movies. Heard of a little film called Metropolis? How about The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari? While The Pleasure Garden was attacked in America for being too sexually explicit, lots of women's legs on display, it's a bit more boilerplate than either German Expressionism or future Hitchcock movies. There's no iconic director cameo, and it wasn't a huge hit. But it was successful enough that Hitchcock stayed in Germany to direct another movie, The Mountain Eagle. In The Mountain Eagle, the mountains in question are the Alps, but most sources say it's meant to be set in the US, a country I don't think Hitchcock had even set foot in yet at this point. Specifically, it's set in Kentucky. I'm sure the use of the snow-capped Alps would be jarring to anyone from America watching this movie. The thing is, this year, the Mountain Eagle turns 100 years old, and nobody has watched this movie in almost that long. Sources disagree on what the plot of TME even was, although we know the characters: a seductive schoolteacher, played by silent film vamp Nita Naldi, and her love interest, a sort of rough and tumble mountain man, we think, named John Fear O' God Fulton, from where the movie gets the alternate title it's sometimes known under. Nita's character, Beatrice, is also romantically pursued by the villainous J.P. Pettigrew, who might be a justice of the peace, played by German silent film star Bernhard Goetzke. And Pettigrew gets shot, maybe, or at least gets some kind of comeuppance at the end. There's a dog in it, purportedly named Major, who was one of the film's main selling points. A poster for TME, prominently featuring the dog, was discovered at a Boston area flea market. It's not clear what the dog's role was. Decades later, talking to the French director François Truffaut, Hitchcock said he didn't mind that TME was lost. He said it was awful. Reviews criticized its melodrama at the time, too, and it wasn't a commercial success in any of the countries it opened in. Part of why TME is lost is because it was simply a flop. But Hitchcock himself probably remembered TME unfavorably because the film's production was itself melodramatic. The way he tells it, young Alfred Hitchcock was living in Munich in October 1925, working on movies. He'd been handed a short story called Fear O' God by Charles Lapworth, one of his studio's head editors, and a budget and some actors, if not A-list, B-plus list, to make it into a movie. After being frustrated with location scouts' recommendations for where to film, he saw a postcard in a picture shop depicting a romantic alpine landscape and said to himself, "That looks exactly like Kentucky." Hollywood still does this shit. Remember the 10 miles west of Boston shot in The Last of Us? Anyway, Hitchcock became Hitchcockily obsessed with filming exactly where this postcard photo was taken. It turned out to be in an Austrian village called Obergurgl, which was an extremely inaccessible place to film, way up in the mountains with no paved roads. Hitchcock being Hitchcock, he did it anyway, carting all the actors and equipment on horseback in a multi-day trip from Munich, bringing along a stash of lemons to make his favorite recipe for lemonade, which was not a metaphor. His newlywed wife, Alma Revel, was assistant director. On his first day in Obergurgl, it snowed about a foot, making production impossible. Telling this story much later, Hitchcock says he moved production to another village, Umhaus, although Austrian film expert Johannes Koch claims the whole production of TME went on in Obergurgl. Either way, wherever they were, another foot of snow came in the next day. After realizing it wasn't going to thaw for 6 months, Hitchcock hired the local fire department to train their fire hoses on the snow and blast it off people's roofs. They damaged a woman's house in the process, leading to the mayor demanding a fine of 1 Austrian shilling. I have questions. First of all, it must not have been that cold if this didn't just cover the entire landscape in a thick sheet of ice, even though it was cold enough for a foot of snow to fall. Second, I can't seem to find the value of a single Austrian shilling in 1925, but it can't have been that much. Hitchcock says he gave the woman 2 shillings, and apparently that covered her repairs. Also, this village took days to reach on horseback, but they had a fire engine, presumably a horse-drawn one, in this incredibly remote Austrian alpine town? None of those are out of the question. I'm just going off Hitchcock's account of how things went. Our ever-so-reliable narrator Hitchcock then got sick and began throwing up. In his diary, he blamed the locals' guttural German accents for causing his illness. Given how many silent films Hitchcock cranked out in his early days, and just how many silent films are lost today, it's kind of remarkable that only 1 film in Hitchcock's oeuvre is lost. Back in 1922, he was hired to direct a movie called Number 13, which would have been his directorial debut, but it was canceled for budget reasons before most scenes had been shot, and I'd be surprised if any footage of it still existed, even just a few years later. The only finished released Hitchcock movie that can't be seen today is The Mountain Eagle. In that way, Hitchcock fans are lucky. The Library of Congress has estimated that over 70% of silent films are lost today. How does a film become lost? The clearest and simplest way is fire, or the fear of it. Sometimes that library burning down is very literal. You know that scene in Inglourious Basterds where they set the theater on fire using nitrate film reels? That's very realistic. The type of film in standard use in the 1920s is exactly the same thing, chemically speaking, as gun cotton. Classic movies are literally printed on explosives. Fire safety experts tell you to never store old film stock in your house. Plenty of films that ended up in stashes like this Redditor's find have probably had their last copy thrown away out of fear they'd start a fire. The MGM archives went up in flames in 1965, destroying the last known copies of hundreds of movies, including arguably the most famous lost film of all time, Lon Chaney's London After Midnight. Millions of newsreels, including irreplaceable World War II footage, were destroyed in a 1978 fire at the National Archives outside D.C. Nitrate film is illegal to send through the mail in most countries, and early movie theaters' projection booths were coated in asbestos in case the film jammed in the projector and started a fire, which happened all the time. And if the film jammed and your reel was lost, unless your movie was absolutely huge, that was probably one of the only reels in existence. Movies typically ran in any given theater for a single day, sometimes just a single screening in the silent era. Often one reel would spend months touring the country. In 2010, 75 lost silent films were discovered in a vault in New Zealand because that was usually the last English-speaking country to receive wide-release films. Once a movie had been shown in New Zealand, the reels might just end up collecting dust in a Kiwi theater. And even if it doesn't start a fire, nitrocellulose film just doesn't keep well. It's very temperature sensitive and decays into bubbly slime if the atmospheric conditions aren't perfectly right. Most silent films that survive today survive because they were ported onto 16mm film. Our Reddit lead remains worth investigating, but even if this person does have a reel of the mountain eagle, it may not be intact enough to even feed through a projector. There is a ton we don't know about this movie. Again, most sources say it takes place in Kentucky, including Hitchcock himself, but the review with the most complete summary of the plot says the, quote, locality is not indicated. Another review criticizes the movie for its English language character names amid a clearly European landscape. One says it's set amid, quote, the majestic mountain scenery of the North. I've found one ad for the movie, playing in Poughkeepsie, New York in September 1927, that lists the star actress as Jacqueline Logan, a silent film star who was almost definitely not in it. She was arguably a bigger deal than Nita Naldi, the movie's actual lead. But 2 days before this, the same newspaper ran an ad for TME that correctly cites Nita Naldi as the lead. No idea what's going on there. Also, didn't I say that the movie was released in the US as Fear O' God? That's the name it was listed under in the Reddit post that made me make this episode, but it probably wasn't released in the US as Fear O' God. A lot of sources say it was, but I found dozens of newspaper listings from the US and Canada for this movie calling it The Mountain Eagle, and none for any movie in any country called Fear O' God. As far as we know, Fear O' God was the movie's working title, but according to a 1998 article by film historian J.L. Kuntz, it was changed to The Mountain Eagle before Hitchcock even shot a single frame. That, I think, is the strongest evidence we've got that this Reddit lead is a hoax. That said, movie titles were fluid in those days. The same movie was often screened under several different titles in different places. I can believe that somewhere TME opened under its original title, Fear O' God. There's a long history of hoaxes surrounding TME. In 2014, it was the subject of an April Fool's article on the Hitchcock Geek blog, claiming it had been found in an antique film case being used as a flower stand, which, given how many lost classics have turned up in weird places, is actually believable. In 2019, a Redditor claimed to have found a low-quality recording of the Mountain Eagle among a vast cache of hard drives containing decades' worth of TV recordings. This was immediately recognized as a troll by lost media buffs. TME probably went missing long before the age of television. There's basically no chance it was ever broadcast on TV, and it would need to have been converted to a TV-compatible format, itself quite a process. If this Redditor has a reel of TME, against all odds, how did it come into their possession? Orpheum Theaters were a national chain, folded into the famous RKO Pictures in 1928. That's what the O in RKO stands for. And to this day, dozens of historic theaters across the U.S. carry the Orpheum name. So that doesn't narrow anything down about the reel's origin. OP says their great-grandpa worked at a theater in, quote, I'm guessing Indiana or Iowa area. Of the screenings of TME that we have documentation of, 2 of them were at a theater with Orpheum in its name, and tantalizingly, 1 was in Indiana. But the other thing that makes me wonder if this is a hoax is that, like the Globglogabgalab's basement, this Hall of Reels is a true treasure trove. We have some well-documented, not lost silent films in here, others where we can't be sure what they are, but check out this one. Old Soak. That's a distinctive name, so is there a silent movie called Old Soak? Yes. And it might be lost too! And that movie I mentioned earlier, The Wages of Sin, looking at all the other identifiable movies in this collection, 1938 is probably too late for this collection to date from, so that probably means it's the 1929 movie with an all-black cast, which is another one of the world's most sought-after lost films, and probably wouldn't even have played at a theater in a mostly white area that otherwise shows mainstream films. And remember, this is only about a third of the alleged stash. The rest of the reels didn't have any description or labeling on them. I think the odds are strong that our legs are being pulled. And even if not, these reels are probably just gunk by now. But remember those 75 lost classics discovered at once in New Zealand? There's the chance that this could be one of the biggest single lost media finds in film history, and I cannot rule that out based on the evidence we've got. I've reached out to OP and haven't received a reply. You can too.
Believe in something right, but you do something wrong. A loaded question will break your bones. What puts you on your knees? You paint